Greetings everyone. My name is Annette Shamala Arokiaraj. I am a PhD student at FSSK in UKM. Today I am here to present an article entitled A Systematic Review on the Impact of Brain HQ Speed of Processing Training among Healthy Elderlies. The aging population worldwide is currently on the rise. World Population Prospects, the 2019 revision, revealed information that in 2019, every 1 in 11 people would be over the age of 65. However, this figure would almost double by 2050, as 1 in 6 people in the world would fall within that age category. Shamala in 2019 mentioned that at present approximately 2.17 million Malaysians were aged above 65 years old, and the country would face the prospects of an aging population as early as 2030. It is a rare occasion that older adults would be able to escape the great range of aging declination processes. As an example, they will have a tendency to experience age-related problems of health and stability, such as urinary incontinence, instability, falls, and acute confusion states, which also falls under cognitive deficits. Some other examples of cognitive deficits that an individual may experience would include declines in memory, attention, working memory, and speed of processing. These processes would not only compromise an individual's capacity to complete everyday tasks efficiently, but also reduce their ability to learn other cognitive processes and increase their risk of losing independence. The solution to the above problem resides in understanding the underlying idea of the brain. Neuroplasticity can be defined as long-lasting changes that occur in neural connections when we learn new things. The neuroplasticity of the brain functions in the same way physical training may be used to improve physical abilities in an individual. Therefore, due to its plasticity, the brain provides a lifelong capacity and opportunity for humans to reverse or slow down the aging process through the induction of neural changes in the brain via cognitive training to strengthen their cognitive abilities. With a well-designed cognitive training program that targets improvement in cognitive functions of an individual, the dimensions of negative reorganization would be at least partially transformed to promote positive brain plasticity and a better quality of life among older adults. Circumstances such as the above have left an essential need to identify efficient and effective cognitive training interventions for older adults to delay the aging process and enable them to cope better during this phase of life. Computerized cognitive interventions, or computerized cognitive trainings, better known as CCTs, is used to enhance cognition or cognitive skills of individuals who utilize this strategy. CCTs are cognitive interventions on an individual electronic platform, such as computer, laptop, or tablet that requires a physical response, for example, a button press. It is a performance-based approach that promotes ease of use, great accessibility, and is certainly cost-effective in this digital era we live in. As beneficial as it is, there are presence of some inconsistencies in the evidence related to transfer of the training gains to everyday function. Simmons and colleagues in 2016 reported that there are limited and inconsistent evidence to support the notion that CCTs can be used to help to delay cognitive decline. Nevertheless, the impact of these CCTs in enhancing specific domains of cognitive abilities are rather impressive and can be seen across some of the articles reviewed later. Fitzgerald in 2017 specifically mentioned that participants who received the SOP training used in the active trial, which was developed by Post-it Science Corporation, better known also as Brain HQ, were less likely to have dementia. Reebok and Notman in the same article highlighted the need for more substantial research to be conducted to test out these claims. Brain HQ by Post-it Science Corporation is an interactive brain training program that was developed by a team of top neuroscientists. The most utilized training is the SOP training program, or better known as Speed of Processing training program, which was an adaptation from Ball and Ronker's Visual SOP training in 2007. The aim of the SOP training is to improve the sensory search speed of an individual, be it visual, auditory, or both, and the ability to perform one or more attentional tasks quickly. Possit Science Brain HQ program has the highest level of empirical evidence with regards to the effectiveness of the exercises involved in improving a range of cognitive abilities. To the knowledge of the researchers, there has been no systematic review that solely focuses on analyzing the training provided specifically by the Possit Science Corporation only, confirming the novelty of this review. Therefore, the aim of this systematic review was to examine the researchers that have utilized specifically the SOP training developed by Possit Science to provide a thorough analysis of the particular program. The objectives that would be addressed in this review are to identify benefits of the SOP training conferred to processing speed and attentional cognitive domains, to summarize similarities and differences across exposure, adherence, and implementation of the SOP cognitive intervention according to their outcomes, and last but not least, to identify how many studies included transfers of the SOP training and which of these have conferred benefits to cognitive abilities and everyday functioning. This systematic review was conducted in a series of 5 steps identified by Sood and colleagues in 2019, whilst closely following the guidelines provided by the Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis, better known as PRISMA. The first step involves identifying the research questions that are a close reflection of the research objectives mentioned in the previous slide. The second steps involve identifying relevant studies. The search process for this study was carried out beginning 18th March 2020 and was completed on the 3rd of June 2020. 3 resources of information were used to gather data for this research, namely a shared database of studies involving CCTs, PubMed, better known as Medline, and Google Scholar. The PICO framework was used to determine the eligibility criteria of the research that would be included in this systematic review. Its abbreviation indicates P for population, which in this case reflects on healthy older adults. I for intervention, which in this case would focus on the speed of processing training by Possit Science. C for comparison, which reflects the comparison between experimental and control groups in each research. And lastly, O for outcome, which reflects processing speed, attention, and other cognitive abilities as well as everyday functions. The search was initiated by scouting for articles that have utilized the SOP training program by Possit Science on a shared database with all research that has been conducted on CCTs obtained from an employee at Possit Science Corporation. The articles obtained through this database search were cross-referenced and checked using PubMed and Google Scholar in addition to conducting a search on these databases. Some search terms or keywords used includes those listed on the slide. An example of the limits used are also listed here. A total of 32 possible combinations of search categories using the keywords above led to the compilation of related manuscripts. Search results were limited to articles published in the English language only. The third step of the methodology process in this review involves screening and study selection. The table below lists a range of inclusion and exclusion criteria that were utilized to select manuscripts for the process of this review. Articles were included if they had utilized Possit Science's SOP training, involving older adults aged 55 and above, and also including healthy participants. Articles were excluded if it involved participants other than healthy older adults, such as those that include participants with impairments, ailments, mental health issues, or deficits in initial baseline measurements, as well as studies without cognition and everyday functioning related variables as measures. Outcome measures included in the selection criteria are as follows. For primary outcomes, the criteria included cognitive function or abilities measured using standardized measures for SOP and attention, intervention specification measured by exposure, such as duration per session, frequency, and total hours of contact, implementation, lab or home base, and number of exercises completed, and adherence, attrition rates, and reasons for attrition. The effectiveness of CCT, measured through effect sizes if available, and other results were also included. For secondary outcomes, the criteria included adaptive functioning through far or near transfer, measured by effect sizes if available, and other results. The fourth step in this methodology process involves charting and extraction of data. The reviewers screened articles by title and abstracts, along with the relevant websites to identify eligible articles. Full text records were also viewed for further screening prior to deciding inclusion of an article in this review. Most articles obtained from the shared database provided by the POSIT Science employee included full text articles. Non-full text articles that were deemed relevant through title and abstract screening were searched via Google Search and Google Scholar as a first step. In situations where these manuscripts could not be obtained, specific requests were channeled to the principal investigator of each study. Some manuscripts have been received while others are pending receipt. In articles containing information on both the pilot and main study, only results of the latter were utilized for the purpose of this review. Extracted data were charted on Microsoft Word using the template in the study synthesis section. Another part of the charting and extraction of data involves the risk of bias in individual studies. Once the final selection of studies to be included in this review was completed, the author assessed risk of bias of each individual study using the Cochrane's risk of bias tool. This assessment was done at a study level across all 7 components to account for any heterogeneity of results. These 7 components include random sequence generation, allocation concealment, selective reporting, other bias, blinding participants and personnel, blinding of outcome assessment, and incomplete outcome data. Results from this analysis were converted into Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ for short standards, by utilizing the relevant thresholds provided. The last step in the methodology process was study synthesis. All the data obtained in this research was extracted onto a template which contained information that will be presented in the results section that follows right after. The following few slides reflects the results section of this research. First, let us take a look at Figure 1. Figure 1 illustrates the flow of studies into this systematic review. A total of 355 articles were identified across the shared database, PubMed database, and Google Scholar search engines. 208 articles were retrieved after removing duplicates. 171 were excluded for the following reasons: different category of participants, participants that are not healthy, articles not related to the area of research interest, non-POSIT science training, non-research-based articles, non-full text articles, articles requested but not received, and interim analysis. Upon the exclusion of the above, 37 full text articles were identified and assessed for eligibility. The final analysis was performed on 23 articles that fit the inclusion or exclusion criteria mentioned in the previous section. An analysis of risk of bias in individual studies was conducted. 15 studies were categorized as good quality studies by AHRQ standards, as each reported low risk of bias across all 7 domains. 5 studies were classified as fair quality, as most of the domains were low risk, but 2 domains were classified as unclear, and 3 studies were classified as poor quality. Now let us take a look at the study characteristics summary. First, let us begin with adherence. Adherence rates from studies where this information was made available were not significantly different between training groups and control groups. Adherence rates range from moderate to high for studies used in this review. Some reasons for non-adherence include training non-adherence, voluntary withdrawals, investigate a drop for inclusion or exclusion reasons such as more health problems, lower cognitive function or incompletion of assessments, loss to follow-up, or death. It was also found that participants who were older, male, and less educated were less likely to be retained at a 5-year point. Now, let us take a look at total training hours. Categorization of this element was divided into two. The first involves studies that reported total training duration below 25 hours. The results are as displayed. Both Edwards and colleagues in 2002 and Mishra and colleagues in 2015 reported significantly better performance of processing speed measures. Participants in the Arokiaraj and colleagues study in 2017 showed better performance and a moderate effect size on processing speed measures. However, no transfer effects were noted on attentional domains. Belchior and colleagues in 2013 reported non-significant but slight improvement in processing speed and attentional domains. Edwards and colleagues in 2013 reported significantly greater improvement in speed of processing measure scores. Another group of studies that fall within the range of the above category are the ones reporting the findings from the active trial. The results are as displayed. Results from this study indicate moderate to large effect sizes on speed of processing performance of all participants. Those who received booster trainings performed even better than those who didn't, and control group participants. The second category includes all studies that reported a total of 25 or more training hours. The range of studies in this category involve those involved in the IMPACT trial. The IMPACT trial studies reported moderate to large effect sizes on processing speed measures and small to large effect sizes on the attention measure. Duration per training session results were mixed. Although Forst and colleagues reported the shortest training duration per session at 40 minutes, a small to moderate size significant effect was displayed by the visual SOP training group. Ironically, Belchior and colleagues in 2013 that reported the longest training duration per session at 90 minutes displayed results with improvements in scores across SOP training groups from pre-test to post-test compared to other training and control groups. However, none of these results were significant. All studies within the 60 to 75 minutes and 60 minutes duration per training session showed improvements, some significant, in processing speed with effect sizes ranging from moderate to high. Now let us take a look at the number of exercises. This category also produced mixed results. Results from the Arokiaraj and colleagues study in 2017, Mishra and colleagues study in 2015, and Smith and colleagues study in 2018 showed improvements in speed of processing, but at a small to moderate effect size range and no transfers to attentional domain. The active studies reported significantly improved performance on speed of processing measures with moderate to large effect sizes. Once again, booster-trained participants outperformed all other groups, while Belchior and colleagues in 2013 reported non-significant but slight improvement in processing speed and attentional domains. Moving on, let us look at the venue of implementation. Majority of the studies reviewed in this research had conducted SOP training at a laboratory. Most of these reported moderate to large effect sizes, with the exception of Forst and colleagues in 2020, which reported improvements with small effect sizes in the measure. 9 studies indulged in home-based training approaches, with the majority reporting large to moderate effect sizes in measures of processing speed. Smith and colleagues in 2018 was the only study in the home-based training category that reported a small effect size on the same measure. Only Mishra and colleagues in 2015 allowed a slightly different arrangement for training through which participants could select their preferred method of training delivery prior to the initialization of training sessions, such as participating in training at home or at a laboratory facility. Nevertheless, once participants have chosen their preferred locations, trainings were conducted only at the venue for the respective participant until completion. Results of this study showed some improvement in scores on processing speed measures at post-tests. Let us delve into the results of other variables of research interest in this review. Across all researchers reviewed, performances of groups that were exposed to the SOP training were significantly much better compared to that of control group strategies, with the comparative difference reported by Jones and colleagues in 2013 that despite the many advantageous effects of training on groups, age-related changes in control group showed slower decline compared to those in training groups in one of the active trial-based research. Specifically, let's look at the effect on speed of processing. As displayed, it can be seen that the effect sizes range from small to large. Some other interesting facts that were discovered include the idea that SOP training is a significant predictor of useful field of view performance, which is a measure of speed of processing. Jones and colleagues in 2013 mentioned that participants in the SOP training group performed at a level of about 7.6 years younger than their counterparts in the control group. Now, let us take a look at some effects on the attention domains. As it can be seen, effect sizes range from small to moderate. Belchior and colleagues in 2013 found that the trained group performed better in selective attention. However, Arokiaraj and colleagues in 2017 and Zelinsky and colleagues in 2011 found no significant impact of training on attention. Looking into the transfer to other cognitive abilities of memory, small effect sizes were discovered. The SOP training helped to transfer an effect on overall memory, working memory by visual SOP training group, but not the auditory SOP training group, auditory verbal learning, letter and number sequencing, and verbal fluency. Transfers to everyday functioning was categorized into two: driving and everyday speed and everyday problems. When looking at driving, participants from the training groups reported significantly lower rates of motor vehicle collisions per year of driving exposure or per person miles driven, and only 18 at-fault crashes. They were also 40% less likely to cease driving 3 years after the 5-year follow-up assessment. In consideration of everyday speed and everyday problems, significant improvements on the instrumental activities of daily living or timed instrumental activities of daily living performances have been reported at small effect sizes. Booster training groups of participants seem to show significant impact on everyday problems task and everyday speed test. We are now moving on to the discussion section of this systematic review. First, let us take a look at an overview of the results. Analysis revealed that experimental groups had larger improvements across most cognitive domains and everyday function variables examined than control groups at all levels of transfer. In terms of duration, a time span of either 60 minutes or 60 to 75 minutes per session provided the best results. The higher the amount of total training hours, the better the improvement on both speed of processing and attention measures, with larger effect sizes as well. A total number of 4 exercises and above should be used in the SOP training to improve this cognitive ability. Although lab-based training was more frequently used by researchers in these studies, home-based training also resulted in equal performances across processing speed. Looking at the effect of the SOP training on the processing speed measure, similar findings were identified in the researchers as displayed. A stronger possibility that larger effect sizes are obtained in this cognitive dimension could be due to the higher number of participants in a study. Moving on to the effect of SOP training on attentional and memory domains. Similar findings were reported in Lampitt and colleagues in 2014, especially with relevance to attention. However, Sprague and colleagues in 2019 reported converse results in that consistent transfer effects were not discovered in the relevant outcome measures. The systematic review and meta-analysis by Edwards and colleagues in 2018, however, reported no significant effect but medium variations on the memory construct post-SOP training. A rationale reasoning for the above-mentioned results could be dedicated to the idea that the generalization of effects obtained through CCTs with specific focal points, such as SOP trainings, are rather limited and may not extend beyond the targeted cognitive ability. This statement was mentioned in Simmons and colleagues in 2016. Nevertheless, studies such as Edwards and colleagues in 2013 and O'Brien's and colleagues in 2013 suggest that SOP-related training may include elements that primarily improve attention, just as findings of this research has reported. Further affirming this information, Edwards and colleagues in 2018 suggested that SOP training-related studies reviewed in their research showed that performance on cognitive constructs of attention, both directly and indirectly, practiced as part of the training process, had significant small improvement effects. We will now consider the effect of SOP training on everyday functioning. A well-documented fact is the idea that reduction in speed of processing would eventually lead to a reduction in the abilities of older adults to perform everyday functions. Consequences of this scenario could lead to a longer duration for older adults to perform everyday activities, ultimately reducing their quality of life. Additionally, it also poses a threat to safety and survival measures. With lowered processing speed, older adults may take an increased amount of time to respond to sensory information subjected to threats in their environment. As mentioned in Edwards and colleagues in 2018, the fact that older adults rated their IADL difficulties as lower is crucial evidence of their abilities to maintain independence. It is reasonable to accept that any intervention that produced an improvement on the IADL is certainly beneficial, indicating in the case of this study that SOP training resulting in such far transfers are particularly essential. Now, let us take a look at the strength and limitations of studies included in this review. The strength is clear. The final review comprised of 23 studies, majority of which were reported as good quality studies revealing low risk of bias. A limitation, however, could exist in the longitudinal trials and studies. The health and well-being of participants across all research were measured at relevant points of the research. However, in reporting their findings, some researchers failed to include updates with regards to this information in their study. Therefore, all research reviewed in this study functioned under the assumption that participants' functioning, defined as healthy at baseline measurement, was somewhat maintained across the years of research, as their data was not eliminated for the final analysis of results in each individual study. In reality, there could be a possibility of some healthy adults showing cognitive declines, mild cognitive impairments, or other possible threats that could influence their performance across outcome measures recorded at follow-up sessions. The limitations and recommendations at an outcome level will now be considered. The first limitation was inconsistencies across outcome measure. Each study utilized in this review had various instruments used to measure performances across each variable. Therefore, the results obtained from each of these measures may not be equivalent in magnitude. It is recommended that in future reviews, all selected articles include a similar outcome measure with minimal variability in assessing performance on each variable. The second limitation lies in the idea that large variability across training technique and implementations made it challenging to determine the best dosage for highly effective studies. A number of studies included a range of time durations rather than specific and exact durations per training session as well. Some studies even mentioned that duration details provided are inclusive of break times for participants, but unclear descriptions of this information across studies resulted in a lack of clarity on the total amount of time spent solely at training per session. The large variability in this dimension made it difficult to determine the optimal dosage for CCTs that are most effective. It is recommended that each individual research article should include clear specification and details of interventions implemented, possibly following a standardized and specific guideline to ensure no visible gaps or doubts in this element. Lastly, there is a possibility that a few studies were eligible to be selected for this review, but they were not analyzed due to the inability to obtain full text documents either through database search or from the independent researchers, and incomplete articles, such as missing a particular section of the article. It is recommended in future studies that these researchers are included as part of the review process, given the possibility of discovering all articles that meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria of this review. As a conclusion for this systematic review, we will now consider the elements reflected on this slide. First, let us take a look at implication of study. The implication of this review is recognizing the Brain HQ's SOP training as a clinically meaningful CCT. The ability of the SOP training to not only improve a skill or underlying ability, but also a performance on everyday functions, shows the capability of this training to create clinically meaningful effects that enhances the lives of older adults and their daily functioning. CCTs such as the Brain HQ by Post-it Science are examples of interventions that are low in risk and cost without creating much burden on participants, mainly due to its advantages, ease of use and accessibility, that a program as such can be utilized for practice on almost any readily available screen, including mobile phones, tablets, laptops and desktops. In Hindin and Zielinski in 2012, a meta-analysis showed that both physical exercise and process-based cognitive training have similar abilities to improve overall cognition. Yet, individuals still have a higher regard for and genuinely accept physical exercise as a means to do so more than the other technique. Therefore, it is timely to recognize, acknowledge, and recommend the benefits of Brain HQ's SOP training program, in particular to enhance quality of life of older adults. Looking at the contribution of this study. Theoretically, this systematic review has further contributed to ideas underlying aging and brain plasticity. CCTs have the capacity to enhance brain functioning as individuals age, furthermore, if they are in good health. Every research discussed in this study shows concrete empirical evidence in the ability of a specifically well-designed CCT to progressively improve cognitive functioning of healthy older adults, some to a great extent. The discovery has further ascertained the neuroplasticity of the aging brain and its ability to assimilate and adapt to new knowledge being transmitted via CCTs that enable improved functioning and greater quality of life in the elderly. Recommendation for future studies. The Brain HQ's SOP training program has been utilized widely in research, making it the most researched training program owned by Post-it Science. The proclamation of such evidence-based interventions are thoroughly convincing and is recommended for training healthy older adults in an attempt to delay cognitive declination and improve their quality of life. However, statistically objective reviews concerning the effectiveness of this particular CCT is yet lacking. It is recommended that future systematic reviews with a sole focus on Brain HQ SOP training include a meta-analysis component to further ascertain the effects of this training on cognitive constructs of speed of processing, attention, other cognitive abilities, and everyday functioning variables as it increases the generalizability of each individual study. Precise estimation of effect sizes would provide a clear depiction of benefits conferred from the intervention, increasing the clarity of conclusiveness between and within each individual study as well. Highlighted in its efficacy, Brain HQ's SOP training easily overshadows other sister training programs targeted at improving various cognitive abilities. As noted from the findings in this review, effectiveness of the SOP training program on improving cognitive abilities in the attentional dimension of healthy older adults are not as immense. Therefore, future studies should consider including Brain HQ's attention-related training to measure its effect on attentional domains instead, given that a higher possibility of effect transference from a well-designed specifically targeted intervention may occur, ultimately creating a greater opportunity to enhance this cognitive ability in healthy older adults. A comparison between the impact of SOP training versus attention training on attentional domains could be made as well, to provide further clarity on the effectiveness of each respective intervention whilst enhancing the overall functionality of the Brain HQ program itself. This now brings us to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank each and every one of you for your undivided attention and willingness to listen to this presentation. I will be happy to answer any questions you have with regards to this presentation in the comments section. Once again, thanking you from the bottom of my heart.